Welcome, everyone. I'm going to give it just a minute for people to join. But thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today on this snowy late April day. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Well, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Carrie Kohler. I'm the Executive Director with the Women's Foundation of Greater St. Louis. Thank you so much for joining us today for the first discussion in a three-part webinar series exploring your unique financial journey. In today's discussion, we will be taking a close look at the ways life and finances intersect, especially for women. So I'm joined today by Natalea Simmons Beaudean, and she's the Managing Director and Wealth Management Advisor with the Simmons Group of Merrill Lynch. And she will be exploring the ways the wage gap accumulates over the span of a woman's lifetime and the ways that women can position themselves for financial success. Following Natalea's presentation, I will share a little bit about our work here at the Women's Foundation and how we collaborate with employers to incentivize and educate on the policies and practices that really create an opportunity-rich environment for women. So opportunities to further advance women's economic success. Now, we would love to hear from you all. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please submit in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to those all throughout today's discussion. Now, I would like to further introduce Natalea, who is actually one of our original founders of the organization, also a former board member and current co-chair of our advisory council. Natalea leads the Simmons Group Wealth Management team at Merrill Lynch here in St. Louis, and this group works with private families, corporations, and foundations in identifying and solving complex financial issues. Now, Natalea truly understands the unique challenges that face women when it comes to wealth management. And as such, she has really dedicated her life's work by helping women and reducing the investment wealth gap. So really empowering all women for financial success. Now, I definitely have to highlight some of these incredible accolades Natalea has. It really speaks to her incredible wealth of knowledge and passion. She's been recognized by Forbes magazine's list of America's top women wealth advisors and recognized by Working Mother magazine's top 200 wealth advisors moms list. So no doubt she brings great passion and great knowledge on this very topic. So we are so thrilled to have her today to speak on this issue. So please join me in welcoming Natalea. Natalea, I'll throw things over to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you so much for inviting me today to talk about how we might address our most important life priorities and better prepare for our financial futures. I'm sure you all know that the economic crisis created by the pandemic has hit women disproportionately harder. We're experiencing both higher unemployment rates as well as poverty rates. So the work of the Women's Foundation is incredibly important, and the workplace scorecard is absolutely bringing light to that. And I'm also hopeful that I can further support why it's so imperative that we do educate employers and educate each other on the wealth gap and the earnings gap, and the two of those combined, really understanding the unique circumstances that we're facing that cause it, make it difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and put my presentation up on the screen for you all. And as Carrie said, you can type in questions along the way in the Q&A box below, and I will be, Carrie will be helping me take and field questions as we go. So working women have felt, more pressure this year for sure with regards, can you see that okay? Yep, okay. With regards to the stay-at-home orders, as well as the virtual learning environment and caring for families. And so both working and stay-at-home moms are being disproportionately impacted, as we said. So today I'm here to share some information and lessons we've learned at Merrill to help women move forward, and yes, even rise financially, professionally, and emotionally. While I'm presenting today, as I said, feel free to go ahead and let's see if I can move the screens forward here. Okay, so just a few disclosures from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. And a couple of the information that I'm going to be sharing today, as I said, comes from a Merrill Lynch study that we conducted in 2018 in partnership with AgeWave. And this study uncovered how women's superior longevity and multidimensional life journey create unique challenges, which can negatively affect our ability to compound wealth. And it's called the wealth gap, and it's the biggest challenge we're not talking enough about. So today we're going to examine a little closer detail the different life journey women take and the financial consequences of their circumstances. And I hope the information and the tips and strategies that we share will inspire and empower you to take a little bit more control of your financial lives. I'm going to skip over this a little bit and just move on into how our research uncovered an innovative way of looking at how women traverse the journey of life. Your priorities are likely to change over time, and depending on where you are in life and what matters to you most right now. So maybe your earnings and career once took center stage, but have given way to your focus on your marriage and your family today. Or maybe you find yourself on your own or thinking about motherhood and what it means to be a modern family. Or perhaps caregiving, retirement, and planning your legacy are top of mind at the moment. We all take different paths and face different challenges, but most women will go through these stages at some point in their life, and some of them even experiencing these stages simultaneously. So we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into a few of the ones that have the most impact on us financially, and talk about the lessons learned and strategies that may be helpful. So you might find yourself single for a variety of reasons, and maybe you've always been single, or you're divorced or widowed. Whether planned or unplanned, it's likely at some point during your life, you will find yourself single. Our research found that when compared to an average single man, the average single woman's net worth is 3 times smaller. And most often, this was a result of a woman's reluctance to invest in the market as compared to men. So our research found that the #1 financial regret of women was not investing more. This information alone should inspire us all to put a bigger emphasis towards actively managing our finances and investing in the market versus letting cash sit on the sidelines. So let's focus on a woman's career and earnings. 70% of women work today, and 75% work full-time, yet women still earn significantly less. I'm sure most of you have heard the statistics about women earning 80 cents for every dollar versus men. But did you realize that this means a lifetime shortfall of over $300,000? So what can we do to close this wealth gap? Well, #1, bring focus to the employer, like the Women's Foundation is doing with the scorecard. But #2, the second largest financial regret for women was choosing a career that didn't pay a higher salary. So we really think it's important when you're starting your career or looking for a career to take the total compensation package into account. You want to contribute to your 401ks and find companies that offer great benefits, such as early retirement programs, great pensions, maybe a possibility, maternity, paternity leave, maybe summers off, maybe flexible work schedules, or even a work from home type environment that can keep you on the work trail longer. versus, so you might be looking at a couple different options, one with a lower salary and great benefits. The other one would seemingly be a better fit because it offers a lot higher salary, but has no benefits. So you really need to find the career path and the compensation package that works best for you.
Natalie, do you mind if I interject real quick with a question from the audience? And the question is, if you had any suggestions, recommendations in regards to salary negotiations, since we're sort of on that topic, and how the best approach when asking for promotions.
Absolutely. So while I'm not an expert on compensation and salary, and I'm not an HR, manager for sure, I would just give you some tips and advice that I found through my career and also through talking with my clients and other successful women through the community. So number one is, I think, let your managers know what you've accomplished in a clear and concise way. Plan for those meetings ahead of time. Plan for those discussions. Do a SWOT analysis. Know your strengths. Know your weaknesses. Know your opportunities. And really lean into your strengths and look at your weaknesses as opportunities. Find ways to develop your weaknesses further. But don't worry about bragging. I think too many women really worry about or have their heads down working hard and think that they're going to be noticed. And the reality is you do have to speak up. You do have to promote yourself. So don't worry about bragging and let your managers know, because they can tell the story for you and on your behalf. I also think it's really important to find great mentors and advocates. And hopefully you know the difference between a mentor who can coach you and prepare you for those meetings versus an advocate who might be one that you go talk to and tell the story after you have it well written, and they go and they tell the other group about you and advocate for a raise or a promotion or more responsibility for you. It is great to build up your negotiation skills. And so one of the great ways to ask for a salary you might not be directly, or you might be worried about being too greedy or being too aggressive by asking the question, but it's amazing how powerful a question can be. So the question may be asking if salary and bonuses are negotiable. If there's any room for negotiation on benefits or flexible work schedule, what is on the table that we can talk about that may have room for negotiation? So asking a question may be a more comfortable way to approach the discussion. And I think it's great to also start by negotiating things that aren't just about money. So ask for some stretch assignments, roles, responsibilities that utilize your strengths and your skills. Seek additional training or certifications and ask for support, whether it's time or money, that shows your level of interest in learning and substantiating your argument. I also think it's incredibly important to expand your professional network, both internally and externally. Get to know people in your community and in your industry, and network. Those will be the people that will, if you decide to leave to find out your true economic value outside of your company, those will be the people that you will want to know that will help you with your next venture. Research the value of your position is always important too. So if you have to consider changing jobs, that's really when you really find out the value of the position. I guess lastly, I would say, if you do get rejected the first time you ask, it's not going to be unusual. So don't be disappointed and don't take it personally. It may be just a factor of timing. Everybody has to deal with budgets and budgeting. And so remain optimistic, remain focused and determined, and keep working on improving your argument. I hope those things will help. And so, again, looking at your benefits, making sure you contribute to your 401k, making sure you get the maximum employer match from your 401k so that you're not leaving money on the table. Make sure you look at all the health benefits. You may have to decide as a couple, or where's the best place to get certain insurance. It may not just be from the company. It may be out on your own, portable insurance. It may be that your spouse or partner's insurance is lower cost than yours. And so those are really things to evaluate. Also, make sure that while you're in your earnings career, you're balancing your income as well as your budget. So managing your expenses and setting some savings goals, creating an emergency fund, and making sure you're not accumulating too much debt or living beyond your means. And those are all things that are incredibly important, as well as just paying your bills on time to make sure you establish a positive credit score. So hopefully that's helpful. So let's move on to marriage and money. Choosing a partner can be an incredibly joyous event, but it's also important to think about the financial implications of it. And so it's a smart idea up front when you enter a relationship to discuss your future financial goals. It may not seem like the most romantic thing to talk about, but it's certainly a great first step to building a financial future together and avoiding conflict and disappointment in the future. As they say, a lot of marriages end over money. And so if you can just address this up front, you at least know and won't be disappointed in where you end up in the end. And they do say that 73% of partners have different money management styles. And so it's really important that those align, because there's enough other areas in the relationship as you're working through life and navigating to have conflict where this is going to be one that can be front and center and cause the most disruption in your life. Again, money and marriage, really some tips and solutions. Live within your means. In today's housing environment, as Carrie and I were just talking a moment ago, it's really easy to buy more house than you need. One of the other great responsible things is really to think about the school district if you do plan to have children when you're buying a home as a young couple. And because that can be an incredible savings down the road and keep you there longer. Watch your spending and prioritize paying down debt and balancing your short-term needs, vacation needs versus some of your long-term retirement goals and planning for your future. You also want to get advice on potentially having a prenup, possibly keeping some assets in your own name so that you have a credit at the end of the day if anything were to happen or you to become suddenly single again. And also get advice on how to title your assets and which of those maybe should potentially stay in single name versus joint name, etc. All right, so let's talk a moment about motherhood. Today, more and more women are delaying having children and even creating families in different ways or deciding not to have children at all. Motherhood may or may not be a part of your journey, but if it is, each path comes with varying financial circumstances and implications. For those thinking about starting a family and considering adoption, surrogacy, or IVF, it's just important to consider the expenses of each of those avenues. And again, look to your employer benefits. Some of them provide excellent opportunities to really have savings and be very supportive. And so that may be something you look for also when you're looking at your career. As you know, that raising children is not an inexpensive thing. As a matter of fact, it can cost more than $200,000 to raise a child to the age of 17, and that doesn't even include college tuition. So it's something that's there in the future. Certainly, we don't want to make decisions based on the financial cost of it, because if we did, we may never have those children. But I certainly didn't look at that before I had my three. So yet it's an incredibly rewarding role, and but we do need to be planned and prepare for it. Mothers today are the primary or sole earners of 40% of the households in America with children under the 18. So it is understandable that we are feeling challenged by balancing work and parenting. And women are time poor. We're time poor. We're managing our careers, we're managing our families, we're managing our households. And so it definitely leaves or pulls definitely time away from managing our personal finances, our planning, investing, and savings during some of the most critical early years of our lives when we need to be investing and compounding our wealth and having that work for us. So please be aware that this is a challenge that we face, and it's something that we need to be aware of so that we can plan for it. In addition, motherhood has a few other costs that sometimes can be hidden. Women lose economic ground when taking off work from their careers to raise their children and even care for family members. Women end up cutting back their hours or declining promotions and altering their earnings power and retirement income. So with this in mind, putting away more money early can help close the wealth gap. Consider using tax advantage accounts like I talked about a minute ago, a 401k, or even an education 529 account, which can help you balance your retirement and your college savings goals. A few other tips and solutions, look for some, as I said, some careers that can help you stay on the career path longer. Maybe some alternative or non-traditional roles or ways to address childcare, which allow you to stay on the career path, whether it's family members, again, balancing some of the responsibilities, maybe with spouses, so that you can stay on the career path longer versus taking career breaks. It is a very personal decision. I understand that. And sometimes, it's always a balancing act. If you can afford it, and if it's a choice, then you just find a way to work around it. But look for companies with good maternity and paternity leave, companies that offer flex time, seasonal time off, work from home arrangements. Again, these are areas that are highlighted by the scorecard, which make it so imperative. Reduced hours and part-time versus career breaks can certainly keep financial benefits accruing. You don't lose your Social Security benefits, you keep your 401k match, you keep your 401k contributions, and you can even keep some of your healthcare benefits. So consider part-time versus taking longer career breaks. As long as you're thinking about taking time away, you just want to understand the long-term financial implications of that. Also, if you're planning to go to work or back to work in the future, make sure to keep your skills sharp and be prepared to rejoin the workforce. I have had clients that have taken many years break, but were very involved in PTOs, taking leaderships inside the school, and actually exited their stay-at-home years very successfully and getting six-figure jobs and going back into the workforce after long periods of time with the leadership skills that they were able to gain while staying at home with their children. So it can work. It's also important to understand that kids don't go away. They're here for a really long time. For those of you that are soon to be empty nesters, it's important to talk to your kids about experiences and find them financial support in college and early adulthood. And we also have to think a lot about how to educate our kids early on finances and equip them with, as the generations move forward, do a better job equipping the younger about the finances and money and how to budget as well. On the other end of caregiving, we have on the other end of caregiving for children, we have the caregiving for seniors. And this is also a significant reality, and the costs are staggering. Women are the most common caregivers for aging parents and spouses. And so we spend a lot more time in this area than our male counterparts. We're 3 times more likely to retire early to help out family members, either spouses or parents. A woman caregiver who leaves the workforce can lose, on average, almost $325,000 in wages and benefits. And this is in addition to the wage gap. So this contributes to another portion to what we call the wealth gap. So before deciding to scale back your career to retire early, again, consider the financial implications and how that may weigh on you down the road. You don't want to become a burden on your family later. You want to understand Medicare and consider long-term care options and disability insurance for yourself and family members. So again, just another thing to take in consideration as a woman, since it does happen more likely for women than men. So this is what we define as the wealth gap. It's the difference between the wage gap, it's the accumulation of the wage gap, taking time off for parenting for young children, taking time off to parent for family members, parents, And again, another career gap down that potentially early or later in our career or retiring early to care for spouses who we tend to, or partners, as most of us tend to marry or be in relationships with someone a few years older than us. So it's daunting to believe that the accumulation of all of these things over our lifetime can amount to over $1 million in lifetime retirement gap. And probably the biggest reason why women's needs are so different from men in terms of financial savings and investing is our longevity. We are in the midst of a longevity revolution. And the bottom line is that more money will be required to achieve the same standard of living in retirement. And this money will have to last us longer. Everyone needs to have longevity on their radar, but especially women. 81% of those age of 100 or older today are women. And at age 85, women outnumber men 2 to 1. 77% of widows today are women. So it is important to get involved early in the conversations about retirement, about money and investing. Know what's going on, know where your money is, know what your investment strategy is, and understand taxes and other important factors with regard to your overall financial situation. The more involved you are, the less daunting it will be when you find yourself some point in life potentially single or managing it on your own. Another reality in today's world is that retirement is lasting a lot longer, 20 years or more that we spend in retirement. And, and this wasn't really always intended that way. And so women spend 5 years longer than men on average in retirement, with smaller nest eggs from career breaks and earnings wage gap. And we also tend to have higher healthcare costs because we live longer. And so that can equate to almost $200,000 more than men during our retirement years. So we're more likely to be the ones to provide healthcare for our spouses and our families, but we're also the ones that more likely to require long-term care and someone to care for us at the end. And 42% of women today are afraid they will run out of money by the age of 80. A typical retirement cost is around $800,000, and only 9% of American women have $300,000 or more saved. So we need to be investing earlier and saving earlier. So this is an example of how investments can provide an opportunity for women to grow their money in ways that income alone doesn't. And it's an example of two different individuals here, Chris, who starts at the age of 85, and Terry, who starts at age 45. And Chris puts away $133 a month and was able to contribute $48,000 over 30 years. And so at the end, at age 65, he'd amassed $130,000. Terry, who was busy during her younger years having children and balancing priorities, didn't start saving until age 45. And she started saving significantly more at $200 a month than what Chris started. She saved for 20 years, which ended up being 10 years less than Chris, and the same amount. But the loss of compound growth and interest on that money resulted in $40,000 less by the time she was 65 years old. So this is the benefits of compounding and starting early. And that's what we want to try to help more women do, get more comfortable investing, finding support, and looking for ways to invest earlier. So it's to bring it all together, we have a unique life journey that we have to understand, and the circumstances and realities around that make it difficult for us to accumulate and build wealth. And understand and be aware of the wealth, the pay gap, and how we can do and adjust and build skills to help close that gap. Although I would submit that even though we can be perfect at our negotiation skills, we can be perfectly educated, have the same background, earnings, and experience, and still make less than men. So there will always be biases in the system. There will always be maybe not always, I should say, but I wouldn't expect that to change over the night, but we should prepare ourselves to be ready to be the best that we can be, but also be realistic, and that, that it's not going to change overnight. So be prepared for the wage gap, understand the financial implications of taking career breaks, which cause more of the wealth gap. So caring for family members and spouses and children, and what that can mean for us long term, and means we need to invest earlier and save more, and then also being prepared to live longer, and a year of 100 years old or longer. And so Carrie talked about, I've been doing this for a long time, but I also, in reality, I have 3 children that I'm raising. My grandmother's 102. She certainly didn't plan to live to be 100 years old. She's been in a nursing home for over 10 years. That's about $60,000 a year. And so these are realities, and we don't want to be burdens on our kids and our families. And yet we have the benefit of good long lives. So we want to have the joy of really enjoying those years and those final years without the stress of money. So it is really important to me to help women get started earlier. Steps you should consider taking: plan for both the expected as well as the unexpected, prioritize your work and life balance. That's an easy thing to say, a really hard thing to do. It may require you sitting down and having a discussion with your husband or your partner. I certainly did for me. Whose career is going to take a front seat? Whose career is going to take a back seat? How are we going to balance home and work responsibilities, and really leveling that out and having those open, honest discussions. Prepare early for your child's education. I started the day my kids were born, putting a few $100s a month into my kids' 529s. It's been amazing to watch that wealth compound with investments through their lifetimes. And now my son, who's 17, will be going to college in a couple years. And what a relief it is to have that money already set aside and not have to worry about coming out of our incomes and supporting that we've already set that aside. Has just been amazing. Maximize tax advantaged accounts. A 529 is a tax advantaged account. It grows tax free. It's never taxed. The gross is never taxed on those accounts if you use them for education and qualified expenses. Same with the 401k. Tax deferred growth is really an advantage and something you should take, not let put on the sidelines. And then, get help, do a personal financial plan. These are the types, and if there's some complex issues you need help with, don't be afraid to ask. Get mentors, there are ways for you to enter and get support in these areas. The financial services industry, there's lots of avenues where you can get help and support. In a moment, I'll also show you some websites to do that. But we obviously work in the retirement plan area and help clients with and complex issues for unique journeys. Want to provide a few resources here for you. Number one, I really want to highlight our women resource page. Merrill Lynch has built a women's landing page that has a lot of information on some of the things we talked about today, whether it's caregiving, whether it's parenting, whether it's career. We have a lot of women webinars. We have professional people come and speak to us, and they're all available on our website. There's a family life organizer that can really help you organize important information all in one place. Also, a personal financial journey website that helps you get on the path to the right, putting everything in together. This is my contact information. So if you have any questions or any other concerns, and Carrie, I'm happy to take questions now if there's anything more that's come up.
Yeah, Natalie, thank you so much for that. That was very informative. And I think some really good takeaways for women to consider. I found that, when you were discussing this idea that women are time poor, I found that just like hit home so much for me. And actually prior to this presentation, I was talking with a colleague about, financial planning in general for us too. And, where we were at on that journey. And I feel like as women, we prioritize a lot of family and even our careers, and then the financial planning kind of takes a back seat. So I'm wondering if you have any tips or tricks to ensure that we make it a priority. Like, how do we make it a priority to, put our plan together and be more aware of where we are at financially and that long-term impact of it. Because I know for me, even personally, sometimes I struggle making that a priority.
Absolutely. I mean, I do this every day, and for myself, I do the same thing. So what's worked for me personally, and I do it for clients. So I decided to start doing it for myself, is annually, I have a live document. It's like a Word document. It's a full agenda, and every area. So whether it's, and I look into every area of my life. So I look into my life insurance. I say, okay, my husband, me, how much do we have? Who are the beneficiaries? Is it a term? Is it whole life? You document it. And then annually, I just go in and I update it. Has anything changed? I look at it, okay, is it expiring? Because what is burdensome is that we dig into those details of each of those areas. What are my savings goals going to be? How much am I going to contribute per month to the 529? What is my goal there? Is it to save, $100,000? Is it to save $50,000? How much do I want to support? Have I hit the goal? But if you document it and then you open the document, you really only have to update that one time per year and set some goals and then check in the following year. Now, working with, checking in on your investments, I would advise probably at least, twice a year, or, especially bonus time or option time, or anytime there's a raise, you want to go ahead and reset your allocation to your 401k. You might as well, while you're there, review your beneficiary designations, review how you're allocating your contributions. So it doesn't have to honestly be that often. Now, of course, budgeting and spending, you have to look at probably more regularly. But I'm talking about the full financial picture. The more you can take the onerous off yourself, and the more you can document and just update that live document. What are my Social Security benefits? What is my effective tax rate? Things of that nature. I think it can be less burdensome.
No, that's a great suggestion. I like this idea of like being able to access a document and just update it, like you said, annually. So it's not as much, it's not so scary, of a thing to follow. And we did get another question. Should we be concerned that Social Security benefits, kind of on that topic, may not be available for those that plan to retire more than 10 years from now?
Well, it's certainly been a topic for a long time, and I'm sure it will continue to be a topic. How will we keep Social Security funded, and will it be there when we retire? So I'm hopeful that it will be there. Of course, we don't want to count on it being there, but it would be a detriment if it wasn't, because so many people have relied on it and paid into the system. And so most of my plans include Social Security for everyone being a part of the overall plan. And I think if we had a break in that system, we'd have a serious break in the economy. But yeah, we have to fund it, and we have to make it a priority for Congress to stay focused on that as well.
Kind of a follow-up on that conversation. Do you anticipate, it's still being available, but they passing an age where, it takes longer to access full benefits? Do you anticipate something like that? And so should we be kind of making those plans for those age adjustments that we could see?
Absolutely. I mean, they kick that back every few years. And so that is actually more likely than anything, right? And so, yes, it wasn't built, the system wasn't built to start paying out Social Security benefits with people with longevity of 102. So that's why retirement's lasting longer now. Instead of 5 to 10 years, it's lasting 20 to 30 years. Well, that's not what Social Security was built on. It also wasn't built on zero interest rates. And so we've been in this prolonged environment of zero interest rates. And so, we have to get the economy back. We have to get the economy growing. We have to have the great tax revenues and tax dollars to help fund and support that. And, and so absolutely more than not, it's going to be delayed and kicked out further for the older you are. And it's going to line up probably more with our longevity, but we can't keep living longer and keeping Social Security benefits the same.
That makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and transition and keep those questions coming in. I will save some time at the very end for both myself and Natalie to answer additional questions. So if we've got a question out there, don't worry, we're going to hit it. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit, along this subject matter about how the Women's Foundation, Natalie mentioned it throughout the presentation, how we're working with employers to help create these environments in which women can thrive, right? Even with family, even with caregiving responsibilities, things to think about when hiring, those sort of things to help reduce that wage gap, help increase opportunities for advancement for women so that we can reduce that wealth gap that Natalie really talked about, right? It's not just that wage gap to consider, but it's the accumulation of that wage gap over so many years and how that impacts our wealth. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit about our scorecard efforts. And I'll just kind of go through some of this. I know I want to be very sensitive to people's times so that we end on time. So bear with me. And again, we'll have contact information at the end of this available for everyone. So if there are additional questions, we'll be available to answer those. So just quickly, the history of the foundation started in 2007 as a grant-making organization and has really evolved over time. We've really narrowed our focus on women's economic success and how can we help remove barriers and create opportunities for women to really advance in their careers and achieve their economic goals. And so our mission here at the foundation is really about change, right? About policy, workplace change, individual change that advances women's economic success. So really looking at transformative, tangible efforts that can help create opportunity and remove barriers for women so that all women in our region, right? All women can achieve their economic goals. And this is just a quick little snapshot of sort of the need that we see here in our state. We still see nearly 40% of female-led households with children living in poverty. We still see that wage gap that accumulates really over time into that wealth gap. We see this past year the impact of the pandemic and how millions of women have either lost their job or have left the workforce because of these caregiving responsibilities. And so really through the foundation, we are trying to create these environments in which women can thrive through our workplace change efforts, through our partnerships, our grant making, which we still continue today, and through our advocacy work, right? So elevating those policies to the local and state level to help create opportunities for women. Natalie did a great job kind of talking about the wage gap, the wealth gap that accumulates. And there's also that leadership gap, right? So we've seen some improvements over the last few decades of women in those top leadership roles, but the gap certainly still exists, especially for women of color. And so that's again part of our efforts here at the foundation is to work with employers and help them understand the benefits of having women in these top leadership roles. And with fewer, women leaving the workplace or workforce because of the pandemic, how does that impact the pipeline, right? So if we have fewer women at this level, that means fewer women that can advance to, senior manager, VPs, senior VP. So what we don't want to see, while we've seen improvements, we don't want to go backwards, right? Because of the impact of the pandemic. And we're all living it. We understand, right? It's over a year now. We understand the anxiety, the fears, the stress that the pandemic has generated, especially for women who have been disproportionately impacted from the start, right? For the initial layoffs and furloughs, disproportionately impacted women, again, especially women of color. And even a year later, we can kind of see that job loss across the board. Especially again for women of color, impacting more women than men. Now, again, we've seen improvements, which is great, but we're still seeing women lag behind men in terms of employment from before the pandemic. And it could take women several more years than men to reach pre-pandemic employment levels. So through our workplace change efforts, again, we're trying to elevate the conversation of gender equity in the workplace by helping businesses really see the positive impact that family-friendly benefits, fair pay, and gender-balanced leadership really has on their bottom line. So this scorecard, our annual survey, we use it as a tool to have these conversations with our local employers. And through this survey and through our work with these employers, we want to really celebrate the innovators, right? So really acknowledge those employers who are leading the way in terms of best policies and practices, in terms of outcomes, right? So having good representation of women in leadership roles, having fair compensation, women, good representation of women in those top, most highly compensated positions. Our work here at the foundation also includes just researching those best practices. For example, this year, a lot of our focus was on the pandemic. So what are the best ways that employers can respond to the unique challenges that women and families are facing during this time? So really, again, just innovate, promoting those solutions and helping employers understand that this really is truly a good thing for the bottom line. Now, the scorecard is different than some of the best places to work that you might see across the community and across the nation, really. Some of these best places to work will use satisfaction surveys among employees, which is great. It provides a great perspective. But the foundation took an intentional different approach by looking at objective indicators and outcomes. So looking at just employee data, right? Looking at the policies that they have in place and, determining the honorary designation based on these objective data-driven questions. And of course, looking at it through a gender lens and then supporting all of this through our community report. So really, again, about elevating that conversation. We look at employers in 4 key areas, which we've kind of referenced already, but the leadership, looking at representation of women in those top leadership roles, compensation. And I will say we look at both ends of the socioeconomic spectrum. So, what's the starting wage and what's the representation of women in those most highly compensated roles? Flexible work policies, which again have become so critical during the pandemic. So, as Natalie said, things to consider. Do they offer work from home? Do they offer flex time? Things like that. Paid family leave, again, another huge benefit that has always been important, but also really important during the pandemic. And then looking at intentional recruitment and retention efforts to advance women. So the survey itself is about 35 questions. We typically have it open during the fall. We actually just announced our 2020 honorees this past March on Equal Pay Day, which was March 24th. Equal Pay Day designates the time in the new year that an average woman would have to work to make what the average man earned the previous year. And just to point out that this is very different for women of color. Women of color have to work farther into the year to earn what the average man earned the previous year. We did include a section this year on the pandemic and the sort of response from these employers on, again, these sort of challenges that were that women and families faced, really. And we got some really interesting results. We looked at flexible work policies to see how employers either maintained their existing policies or started or expanded. And I would say, not surprisingly, a lot of employers among our participants expanded some flexible work policies, which is great. But again, kind of what you might anticipate in this environment this past year. So flexible work schedule, working from home, that sort of thing. Not as much with the condensed work week, but again, that was pretty on par with some national averages that we saw. So in this section, I just want to quickly highlight some things that I think, through our research was incredibly important. Opportunities for employee feedback. As you can see, a lot of employers increased opportunities for that. and through unique ways. And I think a lot of us, who have the opportunity to work from home, not everyone, but those of us who've had that opportunity, it makes communication a bit of a struggle. And I'm sure we've all experienced that if you have been working from home. So that sort of opportunity for feedback has become really crucial during these unique and challenging times, and having an understanding of how one communicates, with their supervisor, with their boss, has been incredibly crucial during this time. And then just one other thing to highlight is that change in performance review. Again, we might expect a lot of those flexible work policies expanding during this time, but I think, taking a close look at productivity, expectations, deadlines, things like that is also very important, right? This has not been a typical year. It's been a challenging year for everyone. And so perhaps, things, productivity or deadlines have changed, right, during these unique times. And so we wanted to see how our employers who participated in the survey responded to this, and almost half changed their performance review process. So again, looking at productivity expectations, changing deadlines, that sort of thing, which was a bit higher than the national average, which sits around about a third. So that was nice to see, because I think, what we've seen a lot this past year are millions of women voluntarily leaving the workforce. And a lot of that can be, as a result of burnout, right? The demands of balancing our work and home life in unprecedented manner. And so I think that was an important one to look at and to continue to look at even this year, right? Because it's not like we're flipping a switch and going back. It's going to take time. And so I think we'll pay close attention to see how workforce participation among women changes in 2021. And hopefully we see more women re-entering the workforce. Just real quickly, some other interesting ways that our employers responded: more PTO, back to school support, resources. We even had an employer provide food delivery gift cards for employees. But another great one was seeing hiring expanded nationwide. So this opportunity to work from home really does create opportunities for women, right? More jobs are available that just weren't previously, which might actually help, right, the wage gap by having more opportunities available to women, jobs that you might not have considered prior. So I think this is also going to be an important thing to continue to look at and see how ultimately this pandemic has impacted the hiring practices of employers. Oh, sorry. Again, just some of those best practices that we look at that really do create these opportunity-rich environments for women, and some that, Natalie really spoke about. Paid leave, so having parental or family care leave is so critical, so that, women who have access to these leave policies are much more likely to stay in the workforce than those who don't. So obviously it's a critical benefit to have if you choose to remain in the workplace or workforce. And so that can then help reduce that wealth gap over time. Paid sick time, being able to use PTO or sick time to care for dependents, also critical. Again, starting wage, looking at the wage, and is it higher than our current Missouri minimum wage? Ban salary history questions. So this is a simple practice that has some pretty unintended consequences, because asking salary history during the interview process can often lock women into lower wages. And so that is a practice that we look at for all of our honorees. They do not ask salary history during the interview process. And there are other ways that you can explore salary, like with salary expectations, but not asking salary history. And then of course, comprehensive anti-harassment, anti-gender discrimination policies, we do require of all of our honorees. Flexible work environments, everything from flex time, short-term disability, childcare resources, on-site childcare, backup care, which again, we're starting to see more employers realize the benefits of offering childcare resources and benefits, that it really will become a recruitment tool by offering these sort of benefits, whether it's, stipends to help with childcare, offering on-site childcare, or backup resources. We're going to, we've seen some uptick in these sort of benefits. And I am looking at our time, so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. Again, we would like to see great representation of women, especially women of color, seeing that higher than the national benchmarks that we see. And then, over time, we've worked with about over 100 employers since the scorecard was first introduced in 2017. And we've worked with employers to really change their policies and practices. We've had many employers implement paid leave policies, offer paid leave to all employees instead of just certain segments. And again, an easy one that we've worked with employers is eliminating that salary history question. Oops, going the wrong way, sorry. Again, we'd like to celebrate our employers, through a media campaign. We also release our scorecard community report, which is available on our website if you would like to look through that. It sort of provides a landscape of women in the workplace environment. And then stay tuned. This year, we will be releasing our scorecard in September of this year. So one of the ways that you can get involved is just advocating to your employer to participate. The more employers who participate, the more, this conversation is elevated. And so I hope that everyone who's listening will have the opportunity to ask their employers if they can complete the scorecard this year. And then we would love, obviously, if you'd like to stay informed about other opportunities and events, definitely follow us on social media, follow us on, join our e-newsletter group, or just, shoot me an email, give us a call, or anything like that. So I know I kind of went through that quickly, and there was one more question that I also wanted to throw out to Natalie. If you had any tips or tricks for women who are just starting their careers.
Sure. So I guess I'll use myself as my resource. So, I graduated with student debt, and actually women, are getting more more degrees than men. So, but unfortunately, we're also graduating with more student debt. So women actually hold 64% of the student debt in America now as well. As a result of getting more degrees. And so it is balancing paying down your debt. It's balancing saving for long-term retirement. It's balancing creating an emergency fund. And, again, the statistics are staggering. So you just basically, you don't want, it's kind of called an even-hand neglect. It's kind of how I think women need to manage their life, generally speaking. So we can't let the laundry get too out of control. We can't get too far behind in work. We can't let the kids go unfed. And, so yeah, we have to balance that just like we have to balance our financial lives. And so it's creating some buckets. It's, making sure we start contributing something to our 401ks, even if it's the minimal amount just to get the match. So typically employers may match up to 3%. They may match up to 6% of your salary. So make sure you start there with a 401k and don't let that go unused, or, you'll lose that money for the employer to contribute. So that's really important to get done. And then, at the same time, balance making a reasonable payment. How many years do you want to pay down your student loan, and whether it's the minimum or adding a little bit more. And then it's also building up some savings in an emergency fund. And, so I think those are really imperative. And I also think Roth IRAs are really important. So I was looking at my 401k contributions, and then I was also trying to figure out how much I could contribute to a Roth. If I didn't have the cash flow to do all those things, I would actually stop my 401k after I met the match amount, and I'd contribute to a Roth IRA and, balance those two back and forth each year. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but, I think it's having a little bit of everything. So building up some savings in all different areas.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Very good advice. And with that, that hour went by very quickly, but don't worry, we're going to be back. So we are very excited to continue this series. So I hope you will follow us to stay informed of our future events on this incredibly important topic. We will have 2 more events later this summer. So please be sure to follow us to hear about those next opportunities. But I just want to say a very big thank you to Natalie. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your wealth of knowledge on this incredibly important topic about how we can really position ourselves for financial success. To the viewers, if you have a moment, please, we would love your feedback. When you joined the webinar, a brief survey popped up, so definitely share your thoughts with us. If you have other ideas for topics that you want to learn more about, especially when it comes to financial planning, please let us know. But I just want to thank everyone for your time today. I hope you found this informative and hope to see you at another event soon. So have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Bye.